Hi friends, Krista here. Thanks for stopping by Books and Jams. Today I'm going to be talking about the books that I have read so far in the month of June. And I've completed 8 books so far, which is amazing. It's the 15th today, and I think the second half of the month might be a lot smaller than that. However, I do have a long car ride. I do have some days off. We'll see what happens the second half of the month. But I do have 8 books to talk to you about today. And I'm going to start with the 5 books that have completed prompts for the amazing Readathon. Bree from 4 Paws in a Book and a crew of others, but Bree is the brainchild of this amazing readathon based on the Amazing Race game show on TV. And she has put together some fabulous videos and prompts, and just the whole way that this readathon has been put together is so impressive to me. So every couple of days, a prompt will drop to go to a new city. And she puts these videos together of some information about the city and highlights some fact about the city that will then go with the prompt that she's given. And so far, I've stayed on track. I don't know how good I'll be towards the end of the month, but so far I've stayed on track and have made it to each city before the prompt drops for the next one. So I'm very proud of myself for that. But the first prompt, which brought us to Toronto, and it was to read a book that you didn't purchase. So it could be a gifted book, it could be a library book. And I read The Minuscule Mansion of Myra Malone by Audrey Burgess. This was gifted to me in my Christmas book exchange that I do every year with my booktube besties, Sarah, Amanda, and Lindsay. It was kind of cool. It had my favorite kind of magical realism where it's very light. It's not a huge part of the story, but there is some magic that happens in this book. But anyways, we follow Myra Malone, who's a bit of a recluse. She spends her time creating furniture and decor, house items for this, not a dollhouse, but this miniature mansion that she has inherited from her grandfather. We learn about her backstory and how it is that she ended up becoming kind of reclusive, almost a hermit. She has started a blog about the miniature mansion and minuscule mansion, and has quite a following. People are kind of obsessed with her style and the way that she makes things. And the mansion also kind of has a life of its own. Rooms disappear, things change without her touching them. That's a little bit of where the magic comes in. Partway into the story, we meet this guy who lives in Virginia, I believe, or on the East Coast. He comes across her blog one day and he recognizes this mansion. He's like, wait a minute, that's my house. That room that is being showed in this blog and the blog post that he was shown, he's like, that's my bedroom, like all down to the nitty gritty furniture. It's like crazy coincidence or not, like what's going on here? And so then he is determined to kind of find out what's going on, and the story goes from there. I thought that this was wonderful. I was captivated. It was a fabulous read. It's just slightly magical, and also about this woman, Myra Malone, and her story and what happened to her, and a real small touch of a bit of a romance towards the end that I didn't really think needed to be there, but it was fabulous. I gave it 4 stars, 4.5, something like that. Second prompt was to read a book with dual perspective, and for that I read The Summer of Yes by Courtney Walsh. This is a friendship story, an older woman and a 20-something, our young woman. She works as an editor. She works very hard, but at the expense of family, friendships, life, like anything outside of work, and has an accident one day. I believe she's on a sidewalk and a car jumps the curb and hits her, wakes up in a hospital, and she's like, what am I doing with my life? Kind of has this come to Jesus moment almost, and is determined to reassess her priorities and for a summer, just kind of say yes to the things that she would normally say no to. So she takes a day off of work and goes to get ice cream and does some touristy things in New York that she never gets to do. And that begins her journey. But while she was in the hospital, she has a roommate in the hospital who she recognizes as a very powerful businesswoman. And she is determined to kind of rope this woman into doing the same thing with her for the summer. And that woman is not really into it at the beginning, but our girl kind of forces her way in. It's a delightful story. I really appreciated the themes of not letting fear stop you or hinder you, but being willing to take risks, willing to open yourself up, willing to be vulnerable at times. I loved the kind of found family friendship aspect of this story. I loved that there was 0 language, 0 graphic scenes of any kind. Like, it was really just a lovely uplifting, heartwarming tale. And I really loved it. And it comes out on July 1st. So I read it a little early, but if that's something that interests you, maybe put it on hold at the library or pre-order it to get your hands on The Summer of Yes by Courtney Walsh. It was fabulous. I think the third prompt brought us to Berlin, and we had to read a book that had movement in the title, any kind of a movement word in the title. And for that, I read a Christian fiction book that has been super popular on BookTube lately. It's the start of the Timeless series by Gabrielle Meyer, and it's When the Day Comes. And I really loved this book as well. This was super cool time travel type of a book, but a little bit different. Our main character and her mother's mother all had this birthmark on them that made them a time crosser. And what that means is that they live simultaneously in two different timelines. And on their 21st birthday, they have to decide which timeline are they going to live in for the rest of their life. We follow a young woman whose two timelines are the 1700s, think Revolutionary War, think Tories and Patriots, early American government, all of that is happening. And then also 1914, which is the start of World War II and suffrage movement. So our young girl is in both timelines and has to decide which one she's going to stay in. There is a bit of a romance. There were some things that happened at the end that I was like, really? Like, I get it. It's unbelievable because it's already dealing with time travel. And normally I'm okay with books that wrap up in a big red bow, but the ending of this one, I was like, I was not expecting it. So that was fun, but also it was a little more convenient than I would have liked. I had a different ending in mind that I was hoping for, but I'm here for it still. It was fine. It was very good, actually. I gave it 4 stars, 4 or 4.5, and I will be interested in reading the next one at some point in the future. Then the next prompt was to read an award winner. I forget where we went for that, but I read Dead End in Norvelt by Jack Gantos. This won the Newbery Award, and it was on my recommendations cart for the last couple of years, and I finally read it. I wish that I knew ahead of time how much of this was historical fiction, that Norvelt was an actual place because of Eleanor Roosevelt, like Eleanor Roosevelt, like they took the end of both of her names and made this town. So much of this book is based on Jack Gantos and his life, and also this actual real town called Norvelt. And I wish I knew a lot of that before reading this book, because I was not into this book at all. I didn't like it. I didn't like the main character. I didn't get what was going on. I didn't get the story. I just didn't care for it at all. I think had I known all of that ahead of time, I would have read it like a historical fiction, not like a contemporary. I don't know. It would have just been different in my mind. I have heard that there's a sequel that is even better, and it did win an award, but I think because of now knowing all of the historical facts, and there's even like photographs in the back of this, which I listened to it on audio. So there's like a map of the town. There's a picture of his dad with the airplane, which was a part of the story as well. Like, I wish I had read the author's note ahead of time. So this was a bit of a bummer for me. And I kind of expected that going into it, because I don't think very many people said that they liked this, but I do feel like I would have liked it better had I known. And the final prompt that I just finished the other day brought us to Cape Town, and we had to read a book with nature on the cover. And I read The Last House on the Street, which has this big old tree right here, some mountains in the background. This one is a historical fiction, dual timeline narrative. Ellie is a main character in both timelines. So in the past timeline, she is a young person in the midst of the civil rights era, 1960s, and she is a white girl living in North Carolina with a lot of people who have strong feelings about race around her, and she doesn't think the same as them. She chooses to get involved with Scope, which is a program where college students came down from the north to canvass neighborhoods and get Black people registered to vote, or get them ready to register when the bill passed that they would be allowed to vote. Her family is not thrilled about her choice to do that, and so we kind of follow, there's the KKK in the story, like civil rights movement, the struggles there of her being a white girl from this town going against what everybody else believes. And then we have the present day timeline, or the more current day timeline, where Ellie is an older woman who had been gone for like 30 years, comes back to take care of her ailing mother and her ailing brother. and meets Kayla, who just bought a house or built a house at the end of the same street. And there's a lot of history that happened in the woods there and the lake back there on her property. And Kayla is just learning about all of this as the story goes on. Kayla's husband passed away early on in the story, or off the page before the book started. And she's just really struggling with her own grief, and things keep happening that are like, she knows people are trying to get her to move away and to sell the house and to not live there. And she's a little nervous and afraid, and what's really going on. I really enjoyed this. I think I would need to read more books set during the civil rights movement, because it's such a volatile time period in our history and important to read about. It was infuriating. There was definitely some sucker punch events that happened in here that I almost couldn't even cry, because it was just so traumatizing, and I can see why Ellie would leave for so long. I thought that this was done really well. I gave it 4.5 stars. I do think the beginning took me a little bit to get into it, but once I was in it, and I loved it. So fabulous, fabulous read. Then, along with our main stops for the Amazing Readathon, we can do sightseeing prompts, other books that may not fit the main prompts, but you read them in and amongst other things. And I do have 3 books that were sightseeing prompts for me. One of them was a carryover from May, but I did read more than half of it in June, and that's Last Word to the Wise by Anne Claire. This is the sequel to Den and Gondola. It was cute. Again, just kind of cozy-ish mystery set up on a ski mountain in very wintry cold setting. There's just another murder that happens up in the town, and the 2 sisters who run the Christie bookshop up in the hamlet up on the mountain, they also are involved with this one as well. They have a cousin who's super annoying but is setting up bookish blind dates, which I think is such a fun idea. And so the 2 girls agree to help their cousin get her business off the ground, and they both go on this blind date in a library. One of them hits it off with her person and the other one does not at all. But the one who hit it off with the guy that she went on a date with, that's the guy that ends up dying shortly thereafter. So they're both involved again, because she was one of the last people to be with him, because it happened the night of their date. And we just kind of follow them from there. They're just a lot of fun characters, but at the same time, I just feel like it's kind of forgettable ultimately. It was a fun story while I read it, but I'm done with it now, and I don't need to own it. And if there are more in the series, I might read them someday, but I'm not like, oh my word, please write more. Another one that I read this year that is on my neck alley and also on my anticipated reads is The Finders Keepers Library by Annie Raines. This was like a Hallmark movie in a book, and I loved it. We follow Savannah, who comes to live with her great aunt for the summer, which is what she used to do when she was growing up. Savannah has a chronic illness, which I thought was really cool, the way that was kind of woven into the story. It wasn't really made a big deal out of, but it was a part of the story because her health was up and down throughout the summer. But she loves her great aunt. There's a big storm that happens, and her great aunt had this library in the back of her house, like a shed that was a library, like a little free library. People would just come and walk the gardens and go into this shed and get books. But because of this big storm, there was a lot of damage in her great aunt's backyard, and everybody's trying to fix it because there's going to be a wedding back there within a couple weeks' time or whatever. So of course there's a hot neighbor who was really good friends with Savannah when they were kids. They kind of had a moment in their teenage years where they kissed, but it was right before they were leaving for the summer or going off to college or whatever. Nothing ever really came of it. But do they try to start things up again? Is that where their friendship is headed? But Savannah has plans to not really stay for very long. So throughout the book, they're fixing up the backyard, lots of garden talk, lots of bookish talk, and then this budding romance between the neighbor, so now a widower and has custody of his daughter, has his daughter with him for the first time. And she's a young middle school girl, so struggling with being 12 and all that entails. And he just wants to be a good dad. I just thought it was a lovely story. It was predictable, mostly predictable, but I was here for it. I really, really did enjoy this book by Annie Raines. The Finders Keepers Library. I would recommend it. It was good. And then finally, my other Patreon book club book and another sightseeing book for me was Tress of the Emerald Sea by Brandon Sanderson. I loved this. I knew that I would, and I did. We follow Tress, who is a young girl living on a rock, a big island that doesn't have a lot of vegetation, and she's very content to live there until she's not. Kind of her young love is the son of the Duke of the island, and is not thrilled that the son and Tress are becoming closer. So he takes the kid away to, he's a teenager, right? He takes him away to, they're gonna meet all these princesses in other lands and find him a wife. But in the process of that, the son gets captured by the sorceress. Once Tress learns that her love, Charlie, was taken by the sorceress, she's like, I gotta go get him. I gotta rescue him. So I love that she takes matters into her own hands, figures out how to do it, has some friends that help her to sneak away onto a boat, and she spends the majority of this book on a pirate ship and gets to know the other members of the crew. And there's a talking rat and like a Captain Hook kind of a character. There's a lot of nods to some other fairy tales. It just felt like an adult fairy tale. And it also was like Princess Bride if Princess Buttercup went off to find Wesley on her own. Like, Tress doesn't wait around for Wesley to come home or for her Charlie to come home. She's determined to go and rescue him. It was a fun ride, lots of adventure, lots of creativity of the world building. I absolutely loved this. It is a wonderful entryway into Sanderson if you're curious, because it does take place in the Cosmere. There is a character, I believe, in this book that is in other books. The narrator, I think, of this book is in other books, and I didn't realize that right away. Someone mentioned it, and I was like, oh no, that's not. But I'm like, wait a minute, it is. It is a character from other books. So it takes place in the same world, but it's in a different part of that world, maybe a different planet or something. I don't know. But it's fun. It definitely has fairy tale vibes. This was a 5-star read for me. I loved it so much. And is it solidifying Brandon Sanderson as one of my favorite fantasy authors? Yeah, because I don't read a ton of fantasy, but I love his books. So there you have it. Those are the 8. I have 6 here, or 5. I only have 5 of them here, but here's 5 plus the 3 others that I have read so far in the month of June. It's been a fabulous reading month so far. We'll see what comes up as the month continues. I would love to chat with you down below. Did you read any of these ones? Or have you read any of these in the past? What did you think? Same, different for me? I would love to hear. What was one of your favorite reads so far this month? Let's chat about that and anything else you want to talk about in the comments down below. Thanks so much for hanging out with me for a few minutes today. I look forward to talking with you in another video very soon. Bye.